Pascagoula, Mississippi, 1973. An era of UFO sightings, close encounters, and sensational tales from alleged abductees. However, few stories captured the national imagination as did that of Charles Hickson and his companion Calvin Parker. This report aims to delve deeper into the events of October 11, when the duo claimed to have had a close encounter of the third kind. On October 11, 1973, Charles Hickson, then 42, and Calvin Parker, 19, were fishing off a pier on the Pascagoula River. As dusk settled, the two men reportedly witnessed an unusual oval-shaped object emitting blue lights descend near them. They then claimed to have been paralyzed by some unseen force as three robotic-looking entities with pincer-like hands and a single leg floated them aboard the craft. Within the UFO, Hickson described being examined by a football-shaped mechanical eye, while Parker recalled passing out, only to later remember brief details of the experience. Both men were then supposedly released, finding themselves back on the pier, with the mysterious craft disappearing into the night. Shaken, Hickson and Parker immediately reported the incident to the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. Their distressed state was evident. A secret tape recording made by the police, intended to capture the men fabricating their story, instead revealed genuine fright and bewilderment. The men weren't aware they were being recorded, and their conversation only bolstered their claim of a traumatic encounter.
Last October, in the quiet Mississippi town of Pascagoula, two local men confronted authorities with a rather bizarre story. Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker told of a strange craft landing near their fishing site and of being taken aboard by three unearthly creatures. The two men were questioned under hypnosis and lie detectors, but their story remained intact. One of the men suffered a nervous breakdown and is still under treatment. Among the skeptics were Ralph and Judy Blum, already at work on a UFO book. With W5 last week, Ralph and Judy returned to Pascagoula.
Judy and I stumbled into this book. It came to us to be written. Suddenly we were in a wave of waves. UFOs were being seen across the country again. We were in what they call a flap. And people began experiencing things that they couldn't explain. Something was happening in our skies, in the midst of Watergate, Agnew, the energy crisis, the Middle East. Something was happening, and people couldn't understand what it was. We spoke about UFOs, but nobody really knew. And then it hit right here where we are. It hit Pascagoula. Charlie Hickson entered the news, and we had a book to write.
We were sitting on the other side of the pier with our feet, over toward the river, fishing in the river. And the fish still wasn't biting, so I told Calvin, I said, well, we might as well go on. I guess when I heard it, it was some kind of zipping sound. And when I turned around, in this area out here, about 40 or 50 feet out there, there was some kind of craft, it looked like it's going to come out onto the ground. But it came on down and hovered about a foot and a half or 2 feet off of the ground. We didn't know what to do, like the river behind us and that out there not knowing what it was. So, and then before we had time to really do anything, it seemed like it opened up here. And toward the end, it was, on us. And the blue light, it had blue flashing lights as it was, pushing the ground, but then they went out. And when the opening appeared, some source of light came from the inside and was just almost blinding.
Sheriff Diamond, can you tell me just what happened that night?
No, sir, I can't. All I can tell you is there was two men came into the sheriff's department approximately 8:30 and 9 o'clock. They were all excited, upset, wanting to climb the walls, hysterical, crying. That's actually all I know is what happened. And as far as me seeing what happened, I don't know.
Of course, we could see them in the opening coming from, when they started out the craft. But
Did you think it was people coming out at first?
Well, they had I kind of thought it was people at first, off like that. But of course, when they appeared there in front of me, it was the most shock I've ever had in my life.
What did you see?
Well, they were shorter than me. I'd say about 5'2" or 3", and they didn't have a neck. it seemed to come directly to their shoulders. And it had something it came out to a point about where my nose would be, and on each side the ears. I believe that they looked like they were a little longer on the ears than the nose.
But still pointed to
They
you.
were still pointing, yes.
But since I was down there, since I was a physician and several other scientists and investigators were asked to consult and look into the situation, I was asked would I mind if I would be present, and I said I wouldn't mind at all. And while it is still very difficult for us to believe that a spaceship landed and that robot-type creatures came out and actually took these two people into the spaceship, these men, in my opinion, believe that they saw this, and that they were being honest in reporting what they have reported.
But it seemed to me when they came out that doorway, that opening or whatever it was, then just almost instantly they were right there on us. And their arms, they had arms, and I saw the arms moving here and in the shoulders, but they had weld. I mean, their fingers were weld, and then they had something like a thumb, and they were like this.
We questioned that link. And then we left the room and recorded all the conversation they had. Recorded between the two of them. And one of them kept on praying. And he said, after all I went through on this earth, he said, why should I have to see something like this?
Calvin Parker, I was questioning him, and at one time he wanted to climb the wall. That's how nervous and how shook up he was.
They had me one on this arm like this, and on the other one, they had my other arm like that. And I just seemed to lift up to the same height they were off the ground, and we just moved into the crowd.
Now inside, how did they lay you out? Do you remember how it happened?
Yes. I didn't see any tables or chairs or anything in there. I'm not saying there wasn't in there because the light was almost blinding, but I didn't see any. And when they carried me inside, they seemed to just lean me back, And this eye, I keep referring to it as an eye, and it moved up in front of me about this close, and it started right at my eyes, looking me right in the eye. And it seemed that it hesitated there for a few seconds, and it just started moving over my entire body. When they brought me in from the craft that could belong to here, and they didn't drop me, they just released me back to the ground. And I fell. I don't know why my legs were weak. I don't know why it was the fright or what it was, but I fell onto the ground. And that's when I seen Calvin. He's standing right over here in this area, and he was standing facing the river with his arms outstretched like that, just like he was staring at something.
Tell me about the lie detector, it said.
Well, so that was run by Pilgrim. It was a Pilgrim.
Pennington.
Pennington.
That they run this type of test about 6 times a day. And when they were asked to come over here to talk to these people, they had in their mind that it was just a big joke. If I understand it correctly, they ran one test on Mr. Hickson. The machine showed that he was telling the truth. Then they run another one. And then the examiner, he began to wonder himself. So he ran the third test, and he believed just what Mr. Hickson had told him.
Like many UFO encounters, the Hickson-Parker case garnered a spectrum of responses. Skeptics pointed out the lack of physical evidence and suggested that the men might have been influenced by the UFO fervor of the time. Others believed the two men were seeking attention or perhaps even suffered from a shared delusion or hallucination. Conversely, UFO enthusiasts and some researchers saw the case as a significant event in the annals of ufology. Their claims were bolstered by the men's consistent stories, their apparent terror, and the absence of any clear motive for fabrication. Both men underwent polygraph tests and psychological examinations. The polygraphs supported their accounts, and psychologists found no evidence of mental illness or hallucination tendencies. However, the reliability of polygraphs remains controversial, and the psychological assessments, while indicative, are not definitive proof. For years, the incident haunted both men. Parker initially tried to avoid the limelight but later spoke about additional experiences with extraterrestrial beings. Hickson, on the other hand, remained vocal about his experience until his death in 2011, often speaking at UFO conventions and giving interviews. The Hickson-Parker abduction story remains an enigma. With limited physical evidence and relying primarily on testimonies, the truth behind that October night is challenging to decipher. From an investigative standpoint, there are unanswered questions and ambiguities. However, one cannot dismiss the genuine distress the two men exhibited or the fact that their stories never wavered. Whatever the reality, the Pascagoula incident remains one of the most compelling tales in UFO lore.
A coast life legend, now 50 years old, two men abducted by aliens while fishing on the Pascagoula River. Those two men, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker, have now passed away, Parker dying just 2 months ago. But the legend lives on.
I wasn't there. I don't know. But something happened. It happened here in Pascagoula, October 11th, 1973.
Exactly what happened on the Pascagoula River is still being debated around town.
Piques your curiosity, and you kind of want to know, is it true, or is there really something out there?
Do I believe they're just coming and picking random people up in the middle of the night? No, not really.
As a child, Rebecca Davis first heard about what's now called the best documented case of alien abduction.
I just remember my friend's dad putting aluminum foil in the windows, and that intrigued me. And so I asked him why he was doing it, and he said, so the aliens can't get to our brains.
Rebecca then went home and asked her grandparents about it.
What's going on? What about this UFO? And I got told, hush, child, we don't talk about that.
And she didn't talk about it until many years later when Rebecca was cleaning out her grandparents' house and found these newspaper clippings.
So there is the old Pascagoula River drawbridge.
Also staying silent for decades, Calvin Parker. He didn't talk publicly about it until 2018 when he released a book, The Closest Encounter.
We got abducted, took a board, we got an examination, then we got put back out.
He later wrote another book, and with the encouragement of Rebecca, over the next 5 years, Calvin told his story to whoever would listen.
He did not have a lack for not talking. The man could talk. I think he hungered for that human acceptance.
A historical marker now overlooks the site of the alleged abduction. With Main Street, Pascagoula, Rebecca led the way for the placement of the landmark. She also organized the start of what's now an annual community celebration of the story every October.
The community embraced him, and he needed that. He needed some closure to a part of his life that he left. You can't tell that story that many times and not embellish it.
Parker and Hickson first told their story at the Jackson County Sheriff's Department, and their accounts were recorded.
I just feel crying right now.
From the time of those recordings until their deaths, the story stayed the same.
I just don't know how you can make up things that are in these books and the detail that they're in. And that would take way more than some imagination.
They weren't human beings.
Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker may not be around anymore to tell their story, but that doesn't mean the conversation will stop.
I don't think his story will ever die. I don't. I got chill bumps. Okay, Mr. Calvin, stop it.
Exactly what happened on the Pascagoula River 50 years ago may always be a mystery, but the legend is a convincing one for Rebecca Davis.
Believe it or not, but I choose just to believe.